continuously rubbing her eyes as we speak, though her tears no longer fall, showing us old photos. She was Daddy's favorite, the youngest of her 8 siblings, but the toughest of the girls. He told me, take care of your sisters, she remembers, and don't go out because of the explosions. That was the last time she heard his voice, the evening before he was killed in battle. Her father, Ali Al-Tabi, was 50 years old, a sniper in the Iraq-Iran war.
There was a time, and the summit was not so long ago, when America was the leader in global affairs, when America was trusted to do the right thing, and when the president was considered to be something much more than an elected leader, but one who truly had the world's rapt attention for being there to make the right call at the right time. Those times, if one listens to the various pundits, are now consigned to the dustbin of ancient history, especially when it comes to Iran, Iraq, the Middle East in general, and other flashpoints around the globe. Let's welcome back to MidPoint Chief Analyst for LIGNET, the Langley Intelligence Group Network, former member of the CIA, Fred Fleitz, joins us today on MidPoint. Fred, thanks so much for being here.
Hi, Ed. Good to be here.
Fred, it seems to have been lost a little bit in everything that has happened with MH17, with what's going on in Israel right now and the conflict with Hamas. We have not paid a tremendous amount of attention lately to Iraq and Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki. It would seem as if that he is still flying under the radar, and to most people it would seem that something still has not been done, and that is still a volatile issue that we as Americans and the world itself seems to have almost forgotten.
I think that's exactly right. It seems difficult for American officials and the American news media to deal with too many simultaneous catastrophes and calamities. Under the situation in Iraq, they are unable to select a new prime minister, which means Maliki could remain in office for months, maybe a year. He is so destabilizing, he is so hating Sunnis. This is simply going to drive this conflict.
Does it simply come down to the Sunni issue with him, or is there something else that we're missing when it comes to al-Maliki?
It's the Sunni issue, and it is his tendency to set himself up as an autocratic leader, to not listen to others and to move in an anti-democratic fashion. And that's really what's driving the alienation towards him by non-Shiites.
Is it fair to say that at this point in his career, if you will, that he is really nothing more than a puppet for Iran?
I think he has a strong relationship with Iran. I'm not prepared to say he is a puppet of Iran just yet, but as this conflict worsens, and given the likelihood he may be in office longer, he will become more and more reliant on Iran. And, maybe in a few months from now, all experts will agree that he is indeed an Iranian puppet.
When we talk about replacements here, are there any real candidates? Because I love it when we get into elections and we talk about people who may replace him, but we never hear any names. Of course, it would seem as if these are phantom candidates, to say the least, or phantom replacements.
There is no candidate. He has to be replaced by a Shiite under the power sharing agreement. The prime minister has to be a Shiite. And there isn't a Shiite candidate who seems to be capable of getting more. One candidate who's been mentioned is Ahmad Chalabi, the controversial Iraqi leader who has been accused of putting forward false information concerning the Iraq War in 2003. He has some substantial support, but he doesn't have nearly enough support to overcome Maliki. And I think Iraqi Shiite political officials realize that Chalabi becoming the prime minister of Iraq would be extremely unpopular in the West and would probably cost Iraq on the world stage.
Has anything happened in the last couple of weeks? And again, I like to bring it to that because it almost seems months since the last time we actually talked about Iraq and we focused on it with everything that's happening here around the world right now. But the last time we really dug into it, and the news media did, we were talking about whether or not we would be able to offer them any help. Could they hold off Baghdad? What was ISIS doing? How close were they getting? How close were they to actually creating that state and basically taking over permanently that large part of Iraq? Has anything really changed, or better put, has anything gotten better for the Iraqis to try and hold on to their own country?
Well, the reason we haven't heard much is that the instability in Iraq has become the status quo, and the media has become uninterested in it. It's still extremely unstable, and ISIS is making gains and consolidating its position. There are those who said that ISIS may try to take Baghdad. I never agreed with that. Baghdad is a Shiite city. These ISIS rebels would be eliminated if they try to attack the city, and I don't think that ever was in the cards. ISIS is trying to cut off supply lines to Baghdad and communication lines to other areas of the country. I think the Iraqi government has made some small progress against ISIS over the last couple of weeks, but ISIS is still a formidable force, and not much has been done to dislodge it from the territory it currently controls.
I want to talk about ISIS here for a second, because the latest that we hear is the Christians have been forced out in Mosul, and ISIS is now basically threatening their lives, and every Christian pretty much has left. Are we missing here what is the humanitarian/religious issue here that is going on, and what is a heinous destruction of a culture that has lasted in that part of the world for centuries?
This is a terribly underreported story of how Christians in the Middle East have been under fire over the past 20 years. These Christians are ancient. They've been there for, up to 2,000 years. And ISIS is now pushing them to convert to Islam or be killed. They're being driven from their homes. As they leave their homes, their possessions are being stripped from them from ISIS rebels. And I don't know that they're being killed yet, but I think that's something that we should be very worried about. This is a consequence of this fanatic Islamic group gaining power in Iraq.
Have we hit it now to the point with ISIS where they are pretty much sitting still? I agree with you. I don't think ISIS ever had any idea or any real concept to take Baghdad. They didn't have to take Baghdad in order to make their point. So are they now pretty much in the phrase hunkered down, sitting, waiting, and now they'll try to work with the land that they have at this point to create some sort of deal, if you will?
I don't think ISIS will ever deal. I think ISIS is consolidating in its position and continually to spread the amount of territory that it controls. And I think it has very ambitious goals. It has threatened terrorism in Jordan. I believe it has its eyes on Israel and Lebanon. And it is also working in Syria to undermine the Assad government. So I don't think ISIS is going to sit still.
Will we ever understand that, and Fred, every discussion that we have, every time I discuss this, every time we have any sort of an expert on, I always come down to this. And the answer really has never changed, but I ask you because you're the expert. Have we as a people and a government finally gotten to the point where we will understand that it is Islamic extremism or the highway in some areas of the world, specifically in that area of the world? We can crow, we can make plans, we can get involved, we can throw money at it, whatever we want, but at the end of the day, whether it's now, 2 weeks, 2 years, or 2 decades down the road, it is still going to come down to Islamic extremism.
Well, I would call it Islamist extremism, just as the way I see it. I think American leaders have to realize that this is a serious threat, and it can be, we can combat it. The problem with this administration is that they've been very reluctant to criticize radical Islam. They've been reluctant to use the word terrorism. I don't think they've ever used the word radical Islam. And I think this has created an opening for these extremists to spread their ideology. Western states have to stand firm against this ideology, and we have to stand with moderate Muslims to defend themselves and to oust these people.
I wanted to make sure that we brought Iran into the picture here, because I did talk about that a little bit at the beginning here. We know what we're talking about here with al-Maliki and what has happened there. I mentioned Iran a couple of minutes ago here. Does this pretty much, though, in many ways, if something doesn't happen, if there is not some sort of stable government there, at least within the next year or two, maybe less, that we have handed Iraq to Iran basically on a silver platter?
Well, there are some who argue we should stay out of this conflict and let these various parties kill each other because they're all anti-American. ISIS is anti-American, Iran is anti-American, Iran hates ISIS. I think an unstable Iraq actually is not in Iran's interest because it gives rise to a radical Sunni terrorist group which is very much against Shiite Iran. Iran wants a stable Shiite government. Iran would like Maliki to stay if possible. If Maliki can't stay, Iran will probably try to install Chalabi as the prime minister of Iraq. But I don't think an unstable government in Iraq is handing the country to Iran.
Fred, we always talk about the United States getting involved. Is there any appetite for others to get involved? Certainly, we always talk about how many times it seems America is involved in certain areas, and the European Union, other countries there, simply put their hands up and they walk away and say, we don't want to get involved. So is there any reason to believe that as we move forward here, have we gotten anywhere with getting other countries to want to get involved and help settle this, or are they just as hands-off as always?
I think there really is intervention fatigue by European states who joined us in Afghanistan and Iraq, and I can't see any states that are prepared to make a big commitment in Iraq. I think there's a possibility if the Shiite government starts including the Sunni minority in the running of the country, that the United States and its allies will be able to start providing increased training and military support to the Iraqi government. But I think we're still waiting to see that happen.
About 20 seconds I have left. Do you see anything happening with the United States here in the near future, next few weeks, few months, anything significant?
I think we're going to see the U.S. continue to provide military training and support at a fairly low level. We're going to be pressing Maliki to leave office very subtly, and we're just going to wait and see. The Iraqi parliament is going to meet again, and they're going to try to agree on a new prime minister.
Subtle never seems to work with some people, Fred, no matter how many times we think that it will. Fred Fleitz, always a pleasure, my friend. Thanks for joining us. And a reminder, for in-depth analysis and forecasting on Iraq, Israel, or other geopolitical issues, make sure you go to lignet.com, lignet.com. Check them out on a daily basis. We do here, right here, every single day. Coming up next, more of MidPoint, the show that questions everything.